Today on the show, a special treat for you. We've got Nunes magicians James Szuba joining us today. No Tim Leonard on the show, so we're going to get all of James's thoughts on what's going on with Syracuse right now. A new game being added to the schedule. We'll dive into that. What can this team do in ACC play to try to bolster its way into the NCAA tournament? All of that and more coming up on the Locked On Syracuse podcast.
You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up and welcome in. This is the Locked On Syracuse podcast. I'm Tyler Aki. I'll be joined by James Szuba in just a little bit, but first, I want to tell you that today's episode is brought to you by NetSuite. NetSuite is the #1 cloud financial system to power your growth. Head to netsuite.com/LockedOnNCAA for special end-of-year financing on the #1 financial system for growing businesses. We thank you for making Locked On Syracuse your first listen every single day, free and available on all platforms. That includes YouTube. Be sure to give us a subscribe right there. And why wouldn't you make us your first listen when we've got James Szuba on the show today, the head honcho over at nunesmagician.com. You will not find better Syracuse coverage. You can follow him on Twitter as well at James Szuba. But James, you're taking a page out of the Matthew Gutierrez playbook right now. You're spending the frigid Syracuse winters down in warm Florida right now. But what's going on with you, man? How you doing?
Yeah, I learned from the best. That's Goody, and he does winters right. When he was up in Syracuse, he'd come down to Florida. So that's where I am right now. I got my mom living down here, so coming down here during the holidays has kind of been a treat. So I'm out of Cuse for now. I'll be back up in a couple weeks, but for now, definitely enjoying the Florida sunshine for sure.
Yeah, don't blame you for getting out of those Syracuse winters. I remember being in school and kind of mapping out the Syracuse basketball road trips. It's like, okay, they're going to be in Clemson in February. They're going to be in North Carolina in March. They're going to be at Florida State in January, and just trying to find those warm weather days that you can get away for a couple days. But let's dive into this team. So 5-5. Not where a lot of people expected them to be. I think people expected a topsy-turvy non-conference slate, but I don't think quite to the degree that we've been given so far out of this team. But 5-5, what to you is the biggest? Where has this gone wrong in the non-conference?
Yeah, somewhat surprising. I mean, if you'd asked me in the preseason, I probably would have said Syracuse would be 6-4, maybe 7-3 if they had a good showing in the battle for Atlantis. But 5-5 is a little bit surprising. I think they really kind of got off to a rough start, losing that Colgate game. That was really tough, going into the battle for Atlantis and then dropping 2 there. So I think that's really where it started. The defense hasn't been great. We know they've gone to that 1-1-3. It's sort of a new wrinkle. The first time Jim Boeheim's gone to that. So I don't think they would go to that if the defense was where they wanted it to be. So the defense has really been a big issue, and as has the rebounding, and not as much, but to some degree the rebounding hasn't been up to par either.
Yeah, it's frustrating because this is a team that I'm with you. I probably would have erred on the side of 7-3 in the battle for Atlantis. But maybe it could have gone a little bit differently. I'd have to go back and look exactly. But the biggest thing to me is that this team has not gotten into a home rhythm. I don't know if you've seen this stat, but that's the fewest amount of home non-conference games Syracuse has ever played in program history. They've only played in 4 home games, and this is a team that kind of builds its fort off of some of those early non-conference home games and gets itself into a little bit of a rhythm, into a little bit of a warm-up, and that just hasn't been the case this year.
Yeah, this is the program that doesn't leave the state of New York until January, right?
Right.
Yeah, a few games in the Dome, and yeah, it's the toughest non-conference schedule that Syracuse has had, at least in my memory. So obviously, when you're playing all these games and you're on the road, it's difficult. It does take a toll. I do wonder to some degree how much tired legs and the starters logging heavy minutes has played into maybe that Georgetown loss a little bit. Some of the players weren't quick to admit that, but I think Jim kind of said the starters were logging a little bit too much time, and I think it did play a little bit of a role, if not physical fatigue, maybe mental fatigue. But yeah, this isn't where Syracuse expected to be. There are some causes for concern. I won't say there's no reason to worry, but to some degree, we have seen this with Syracuse before. The struggling through the non-conference, and then you kind of get into conference play and they figure some things out. But they've definitely dug themselves in a deep hole here. They got Brown coming up, so let's see if they can get back in the win column on that one. But yeah, I think if you've watched this team and you've seen the first 10 games, there is a little bit of a cause for concern at this point.
Hearing that, again, historically tough, non-conference, not playing a lot of games at home. For you, does that inspire optimism for what the conference slate, and also just looking at the state of the ACC as well? Does that inspire optimism for you?
Not entirely, just given the way that they've played. Just because I think the defense does have a long way to go, and there are some obvious holes there. But to your point, I mean, looking at the league as a whole, I think we know it's Duke and everybody else this year. There's really, any of those top 5 or 6 preseason teams could vie for the second place spot this year, just because I think it's that wide open. So I think when you look at the league, there's an opportunity there for Syracuse to rack up some wins and finish maybe the highest they've finished in the conference since they joined the league in the first year. And I think they were second in the league behind Virginia in 2013, 2014. I'd have to look that up. But I think there's an opportunity to get some wins. It's just a matter of, will those wins be impressive enough when it comes time for Selection Sunday in March to get a tournament bid? Maybe we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves at this point talking about the NCAA tournament. But you have to wonder if the league is good enough and offers enough opportunity for a team like Syracuse to get in the mix down the stretch.
Well, don't worry. We will have your tournament thoughts later on in the show. We will get to those in just a little bit. But first, I want to tell you guys a little bit about NetSuite. This is it. The putt to win the tournament. Sink it. The championship is yours. But on your backswing, your hat falls over your eyes. Is this how you're running your business? Poor visibility because you're still relying on spreadsheets and outdated finance software? To see the full picture, you need to upgrade to NetSuite by Oracle. It is the #1 cloud financial system to power your growth. They've got visibility and control of your financials, inventory, HR planning, budgeting, and more. NetSuite is everything you need to grow all in one place. 93% of surveyed businesses increase their visibility and control after upgrading to NetSuite. Over 28,000 businesses already use NetSuite. For the new year, NetSuite has a new financing program for those ready to upgrade at netsuite.com/locked. Again, head to netsuite.com/locked for the special one-of-a-kind financing offer on the #1 financial system for growing businesses. netsuite.com/locked. All right. So getting into some scheduling stuff here, because I want to break this down with you a little bit. Obviously, a tough non-conference for Syracuse. They do lose those 2 games that were supposed to kind of butter you up right before you get into ACC play. And quite frankly, it was a soft landing, in my opinion, into ACC play when you looked at everything. Like, you look at that stretch to start the season in the conference. I know you've already got the 1 win against Florida State in the bag, but I mean, who's to say you can't start off the ACC 5-0 this new iteration? So I guess it would technically be 6-0 when you look at some of the opponents out ahead of them. But Wake has played a little bit better. But let's start with Brown. So you add this Brown game to the schedule. They'll play that game on Monday. This is your last little tune-up game to kind of iron out some of the kinks. What do you want to see out of this Syracuse team when they take on Brown?
Yeah, I like the fact that they get this game in there before going into the ACC schedule. And, as you mentioned before coming on, we'll see if they play that Georgia Tech game. But I like the fact that they got this game in there. They squeezed that in. It could potentially help buoy the non-conference schedule. Obviously, we know it's going to be really good, right? But you get a team that's 167 in KenPom as opposed to a Cornell or Lehigh. And, we'll see if they make those games up. So maybe it's a little bit premature here. But you get that game instead of sub-200, Lehigh or Cornell. That doesn't bring your non-conference schedule slate down as much while still not getting a totally formidable opponent. So hopefully, Syracuse can get in the win column with that one. But, yeah, you get the one game in there. I like that. You're coming off a pause. Let's see if they can kind of get the offense, get going again. Struggled a little bit against Georgetown. Particularly in that second half. So let's see if they can get the offense back into form. And really, I want to see Syracuse shore things some up on the defensive end, as we talked about. That's really been the problem. Jesse Edwards has been in foul trouble. I think that's a big key for Syracuse to keep him out of foul trouble. The forwards have to do a better job rotating, and I think the guards can do a better job keeping the ball out of the high post. That's an area that's really hurt Syracuse. So I'd like to see all that, and I'd like to see the bench get a little bit more minutes too. I mean, Benny Williams is going to play an important factor for this team if they're going to be any good in the ACC.
I
So they really
agree.
need to find a way to find him some minutes, get him going, get him attacking the rim, and finally get him involved on both ends of the floor.
Here was my thinking behind getting these last couple games in, because I was very much in favor of getting in a couple of softer opponents before you get into the conference schedule here. But I almost would have rather had the sub 200, and even if it was a pair of them, I would rather have those because
Fair.
the outcome is not really going to be in doubt in all likelihood. I know some people look at that Colgate game and would push back on that, but again, I think that Colgate game is not a dime a dozen sort of thing. I think that is more of the outlier than the trend or the norm. But I almost would have rather had the two games against much worse opponents than you're going to get in Brown, just because I feel like it could have been good developmental minutes for a guy like you mentioned there with Benny Williams. Because, like you said, he's going to be damn important for this team moving forward. You can't roll with the 6-man lineups for the bulk of this season, especially given what we've seen teams run through with all of these different obstacles that they're facing because of COVID.
Yeah, it's a fair point. When you look at those two teams, and you can't necessarily pencil in wins as we saw, with Colgate.
Mm-hmm.
But to your point, yeah, it's an opportunity to get in the win column and get those guys some more minutes, as opposed to playing a team that might keep it close and you might not be able to utilize your bench as much. So it's a fair point. I think when you look holistically at the non-conference schedule, though, when you've kind of already taken some losses here, I think there's a little bit of leeway that you can be given though. For playing, in the Atlantis and playing out at Madison Square Garden, at Georgetown, those sort of things. So we'll see how
Big
much.
Ten ACC also.
Absolutely. But no, I think it's a fair point. Doesn't make for a good podcast to disagree, but I think it's a fair point.
Yeah. So looking at this conference slate now, because, okay, you've got Georgia Tech. That game's sort of in limbo. For those who are not as caught up on everything, Georgia Tech is going into a little bit of a pause. I would guess as we record this on December 22nd, it's going to be dicey. That's all I'll say. It's going to be dicey whether or not that Georgia Tech game ends up happening. But here's my stance on it. You're going to be able to find a game. You're going to be able to find a game with some opponent. I know you'd prefer the conference opponent, and I think the teams with off days there, it doesn't necessarily work out very well. One of them is Virginia. You're probably not going to play Virginia twice in a week. The other one is Pitt. You already have Pitt on your schedule twice. And then one other team that is a candidate is Notre Dame, but they play the day before, so probably not going to be one of those. But there are 5 other games on that Wednesday, December 29th. And as morbid as it sounds, like, I'd imagine one of those teams goes into a pause that will open up some sort of opponent. So you just got to hope everything sort of works out that way. But this is going to be dicey, man. Trying to navigate through COVID and making sure you get as many games as possible in.
Yeah, it'll be dicey. It's kind of like a puzzle piece, or like in New York City, how they have the cars with the parking lot. You move one car,
Yeah,
to move another, to finally move another.
Everything's Tetris. Yep.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think, maybe they can move that Pittsburgh game around, move that Pittsburgh game up, and maybe schedule somebody in that place later on down the road. Or, maybe they get that Cornell or Lehigh game back in there. I'd have to look at their schedule, so I'm not sure. But, yeah, they should be able to find a game. We saw the ACC move to a new rule today. They're going away with the forfeits, right? So if a team can't play, it doesn't qualify as an automatic
has
loss.
to happen.
Right. Exactly. I mean, you have to take in new information and evolve as this thing moves. So I think that's a good move by the league. And then, teams can have 7 players and one coach. So as long as you have 7 players who are able to play and one coach, it could be an assistant, not test positive, test negative, then you can play in that game. So we'll see how that moves going forward as well. That could impact personnel, coaches. So we'll see how that shapes out going forward. But yeah, we're in kind of a new not a new era, but a new area of the schedule where rules are
new obstacles.
Yes, new obstacles. Exactly. Thanks for taking me there. But yeah, we're sort of a new part of the schedule, new information, and you got to be able to adapt and move on the fly here.
Getting back to the thing you said about the roster, because I right before we went on, I was watching Seth Greenberg on the halftime of the Arizona and Tennessee game, and he was talking about how he's actually very against the roster rule because those 7 players, that includes walk-ons. And he says you don't want to make a mockery out of these games where you've got 4 walk-ons available, 3 scholarship players, and then the third assistant on the staff. That's not what you want to roll out there. He wants it to be 7 scholarship players. And listen, I think Syracuse, because of what's happened so far with the roster, 14 of the 20 personnel have already tested positive. You're hoping that there's some sort of herd immunity with that, and you're hoping that everyone is fully healthy and doesn't have any sort of long hauler sort of symptoms out of this break. But yeah, it's something that Syracuse, you'd imagine, is going to be a little bit healthier than most teams moving forward, and hopefully it's something that maybe plays to their advantage down the road.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, hard to disagree with Seth on that point, right? I mean, you don't want to be rolling out, potentially 4 walk-ons in your starting lineup,
Yeah.
or, playing that many.
A lot of run for Patty Casey, maybe.
There might be some fans who would approve of that, but no, yes, certainly with Syracuse, you would hope that they'd be healthy going forward. How the committee would judge and look at that, I mean, maybe they say we treat every game as the same. But I think it gets really dicey and really hard to look at resumes and teams when you start doing things like that. If you're playing 2 or 3 walk-ons in a game that, might not be representative of who that team is if you're playing 3 or 4 walk-ons. So to Seth's point, I agree. I mean, I don't know how you would look at that. I don't know how the committee would look at that fairly when looking at schedules and resumes on Selection Sunday.
Well, I almost liken it, and obviously it's a touch different here, but what happened with Syracuse in the 2016 season when Mike Hopkins had to sub in and coach some games. And the committee pretty much said, we did not evaluate Syracuse in a single one of those games because their head coach was not there. And I'm wondering if that's how this is going to work. And if that's the case, then what's the point in even playing it? If they are going to be evaluated because you played 4 walk-ons and only had 3 scholarship players available. If that's the case, you just cannot do that if you're going to be rolling out there and having a joke of a lineup on the floor.
Yeah, totally fair. And, Syracuse's situation was unique in 2016 when you have multiple teams and multiple different people kind of dealing with this. It's a lot to look at for the committee. The committee already does a ton as it is.
Right.
So that becomes a lot of extra work for the committee to look at on Selection Sunday when you're trying to parse through these resumes for sure.
I feel like when Selection Sunday's a headache, almost helps out Syracuse, right? It probably helps them out in the long run when work is as tough as possible for that selection committee. We'll get to some more of James's thoughts on Syracuse and the ACC as a whole, as well as we'll get his thoughts on the tournament and whether Syracuse will make it. But that's coming up in just a little bit. We thank you for making Locked On Syracuse your first listen every single day. And be sure to check out the Ultimate College Football Preview 2021. Local experts, betting advice, draft analysis. The most comprehensive college football playoff preview begins tomorrow. And hey, BetOnline has you covered this holiday season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before as football continues its march through the college bowls and the pro football playoffs. BetOnline remains your number one spot for all the sports action this season, so head on over to their website or use your phone to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. All you got to do is use our promo code LOCKEDON to receive that bonus from basketball, football, NHL, boxing, and UFC, right to your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for the 2021 season. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet all your favorite sports, so don't wait. Take advantage of all of these amazing new offers that are available to you. BetOnline is where the game starts. All right, so let's dive into some ACC thoughts as we head into conference here. Just one team right now holding the mantle inside that AP top 25. It is the Duke Blue Devils. And for Syracuse, I think kind of fortunate that you may get to face, or that you're going to face Duke, at least as of now. You're going to face them twice this season. This is a team that needs wins, that needs quality wins right now, that being the Orange. And I think to have Duke on that schedule twice, certainly a good thing for this team that is looking for quad ones.
No question. When you look at the rest of the league, maybe not as much opportunity as we talked about. So you want as many of those opportunities as you can. In a year where those are few and far between, you want your crack at Duke. I've watched this Duke team a few times this season.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of things that stand out, but I think if you're Syracuse, I think they kind of match up well with them, and this might be a stretch, but I think they kind of match up well with them, and that the Blue Devils don't really shoot it that well from deep. They don't have a ton of shooters out there. Their best shooter is Joey Baker, and he doesn't get a ton of time. Athletically, Duke is far superior to Syracuse, and that's really where they could get into trouble with some of the rebounding and defensive issues. But I do think this team that's Syracuse that allows the most 3-pointers per field goals in the country, that resonates well into that matchup. We'll see what happens in there, but certainly, as you mentioned, having Duke on there twice, especially at home, is a great opportunity for Syracuse in a year when the league is down.
Looking at ACC play again, right now, Ken Pom has Syracuse projected to go 11-9 in the ACC this season. Let's say I told you this Syracuse team is not going 11-9. Are you going north or south? Are they going to be more of a 12-win team or more of a 10-win team?
Yeah, I'll go north of that. I think they're going to go 13-7 in the league.
Ooh.
I'd be surprised if they finished around 500. I mean, I think they're going to go 13-7. They already have that one win over Florida State, which could be important down the stretch. But yeah, I'll go north of that. I don't know if you disagree.
I like the north of that. I don't know if I get to 13-7, but looking at it, I mean, where does the optimism come from? Is it more that the ACC is as bad as it is, or is it you don't think we've seen the best of Syracuse this season?
Yeah, a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B. I think the Syracuse team is going to get better. I think they're going to figure some things out defensively. I do think there's a cap. There's a ceiling on how well this team can play defensively. We know that just the athleticism isn't quite there as it has been with previous teams. I think the offense is going to continue to play really well. We've seen the offense kind of carry it through the non-conference slate early so far. So I think if the offense continues to just get a little bit better, to keep doing what it does, and if they can just shore up some of the defensive inefficiencies, I think they'll get there. And we've seen this with Syracuse before, right? Like Syracuse basketball doesn't play its best basketball in November and December. It gets better slowly as the season progresses. But as you mentioned, too, the league is down. So I don't think that has totally to do with Syracuse being great or even good at this point. But the rest of the league certainly isn't up to par. Like we mentioned before, it's Duke and everybody else. North Carolina's kind of taken on some losses. Maybe they're the second best team right now. And you have Wake Forest in the mix. Anytime you have Wake near the top of the league at this point. That's
Chris Paul and Tim Duncan aren't walking through that door anytime soon. So
we'll skip Prosser coach and Wake Forest. I think that's indicative of times.
No doubt. So I'm putting you on the spot here, all right? So maybe I'll do a little bit of vamping myself to give you a little time to think here. But I think when you look at this Syracuse team, you're going to need to see some guys step up in this ACC portion. Give me your top 3 guys in terms of these guys are the 3 most important players for Syracuse in the ACC. If you want, I can go first and share my list, give you a little bit of time to think.
I have something in mind, but yeah, why don't you go first while I continue to think out a little bit?
All right, so my number 3, I'm going to go with Benny Williams. I just think he needs to take a step. He needs to take a step and be in the mix. He has to be a guy who's getting 20 minutes a night. He just has to be that guy for this team night in and night out. My number 2, I'm going to go with Cole Swider because, listen, we were advertised a shooter who's going to come in and shoot north of 35. I'm not going to say we all expected him to shoot 40% from 3, but we certainly expected north of 35% from 3 this season. Right now, he's shooting 29%. And then my number 1, I'm going to stick with this guy. It's Buddy Boeheim. Like, we have seen games where, and I know a lot of people might be banging at their wall right now, punching air because I didn't mention Joe Girard, but to me, we've seen Joe Girard play well, and it results in losses. When Buddy Boeheim plays well, it usually results in a Syracuse win. I think there are very few games that Syracuse can win without Buddy Boeheim playing on his, not his A game every single game, but he needs to be at least a B+ every single game for this team to have a chance to win every single night. That's why the Florida State game was so shocking to me, because he wasn't having a great game and they still pulled that one out. But Buddy Boeheim remains my number 1. I'm putting the challenge out to him here. He needs to be their best player every single night because that's going to help this team win some games that maybe they shouldn't otherwise.
I don't disagree with you there. I mean, the Florida State game was probably more of the exception rather than the rule, right?
Yeah.
Because all the other starters stepped up and scored in double figures that game. But To go with my three, I'm glad you mentioned Buddy because I wasn't going to mention him. I just think you kind of know what you're going to get out of him, and it's been a little bit inconsistent in the non-conference, maybe more so than we're used to with him. But I think as the season goes along, we know what we're going to get out of Buddy Boeheim. So for my three, I'm going to go number 3 with Benny Williams, just because I think we've yet to see the best of him. He's handled everything well. I mean,
Oh
he's come
my.
out, yeah.
I
I
mean,
mean,
you'd think he's a 24-year-old, like 3-year vet in the NBA with his maturity and the way that he's handled everything.
No, absolutely. I mean, to come out and just say that, no, I don't necessarily think I deserve more minutes, and coach is a Hall of Fame coach who's going to figure it out. Just very wise beyond his years. And I think, if you're a diehard Syracuse fan, you have to love everything you've heard out of him so far. But to his play on the court, I don't think we've seen the best. We've seen the flashes, we've seen the glimpses with the blocks. I think he's got to get going to the rim a little bit more on offense, but we've yet to see the best of him for sure. Number 2, yeah, I'll go with Cole Swider just because I think we've seen a little bit more consistency out of him, but it hasn't come from the 3-point line yet. We're still waiting on him to kind of have that breakout game that the Syracuse team thinks that he can have. He's definitely capable of knocking down 5 or 6 from 3. He just hasn't quite done it yet. He's gotten the looks that maybe a Buddy or even to Joe to some degree hasn't gotten. He's been more open than them, so I think it's really important that he knocks down shots from range and keeps doing what he's doing. Getting defensive rebounds and kind of getting in the paint and hitting the mid range a little bit. He can do those things, but I think it's really important for him to start hitting some outside shots. And then number 1, I'll just go with Joe Girard. I mean, I think he's the X factor. He's kind of a player that if he plays well, and maybe if Buddy plays well as well, and the way that we're used to him playing, he can get you to a win. He can win you a game that you're maybe not supposed to win because he plays well. And the opposite is true as well. That if he plays poor, if he's turning the ball over and maybe taking some bad shots, some ill-advised shots early in the shot clock, you can maybe lose a game that you're not supposed to lose. So I think he's really important. We know he's going to play a lot of minutes. How much Symir Torrance gets in a little bit more remains to be seen, but we know he's going to log minutes. And when Joe's hitting from outside, he's really dangerous. I think he's a big X factor for this team. He's been handling the point a lot better this year. I mean, he's had some turnovers in there, but he's finding guys a little bit more this year. I think he's getting a little bit more comfortable kind of in that facilitator spot. So Joe Girard's big for this team going down the stretch.
Yeah, speaking of JG3, Tim and I kind of went over the assist and turnover numbers from a season ago and now what they are. And I think when you look at Joe, he's certainly progressed forward. He's certainly gotten better, but it feels like it's a multi-step process with him. It feels like the facilitating is there in terms of racking up assists, but now the ball security needs to up it. I mean, you look at his turnover numbers, he's averaging north of 3 turnovers per game this season. And that number just keeps going up from what it was freshman year. So if he can sort of figure everything out, put it all together, then yeah, you're right. He's going to be a very dangerous player. And again, I think we listed out 3 guys. More than 3 guys are important to this team for them to have a successful ACC season. So glad we hashed out that list right there. I do want to go through a couple of real quick hitting mailbag questions that we had on the show yesterday and just get your opinion on some of them. I'll start with this one. Do you think this team is making the tournament?
You're going hard right off the top, Tyler. I will say yes. I do think this team is going to make the tournament. I think there's an opportunity to win some games here in the league. I think they're going to figure some things out. I think they're going to knock off Duke once this year.
I'm with you.
Yeah.
It's the whole they're going to lose games they shouldn't, and they're going to win games they shouldn't.
Absolutely. We've seen it time and again. I've seen this too many times with Syracuse before, and I know they played a really tough schedule. I know they're 5-5 right now, obviously, but I think that was a really difficult schedule. And I think they're going to figure some things out and find a way to win games in the league. So I'll say it. Tyler, I don't know if you disagree, but I will say yes, that they find a way to make the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, right now I err on the side of no. But again, it's very tough to sort of roadmap what the future looks like right now because of the scheduling for everything is up in the air. So right now I say no, but then again, if you're in the mix on that selection Sunday, the Syracuse brand, I think, is a very significant one. And of the teams that are going to be on the bubble, it will probably be the most significant brand, which obviously I think the tie goes to Syracuse in that case right there. Here's another one. This one comes from Dylan. He asked, who is Syracuse's best player of all time? He always says Melo, but his dad always says Derek Coleman. And this got into a little bit of an interesting argument yesterday with Tim and myself because we're both some of the younger guard here, and we err on the side of Melo, where this is like Syracuse's version of Jordan versus LeBron, right? It's like the new guy versus the older guy. Where do you sit on this? As the Syracuse life or the Syracuse blood, like who is the best player in program history in your eyes?
As a Syracuse townie or former townie, yeah, it's so interesting, right? Because obviously growing up, you hear the stories of, Derek Coleman, Ronnie Cycli, Billy Owens is a guy who's maybe a little bit overshadowed. John Walsh. You hear all those stories, but I've never seen him play.
Mm-hmm.
Melo was kind of that first elite talent that I witnessed and saw in person.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going with greatest individual talent for 1 year, I think you got to give
It's
it to
not
Melo.
even close.
I think you just got to give it to Melo.
Yeah.
You can't beat what he did. I mean, he averaged a double-double and carried a Syracuse team all the way to a national championship after being unranked. So I think individual talent-wise, yeah, it's definitely Melo. One of the greatest scorers the game of basketball has ever seen, bar none. I mean, the guy's one of the best scorers to ever do it. DC, I never saw him play again, but obviously the legend speaks for itself, and maybe a better rebounder than Melo. I don't know, definitely not as great of a shooter as Melo, but could get in there with a lefty and bang with him. So you got to give DC his props too. But certainly, if you want to make the argument for DC as best Syracuse player, he had a longer tenure, could have easily been a national champion himself. So just two great talents. I mean, you can go either way.
It's so fascinating too because it's completely different arguments. You've got one guy on one side, one and done, but national champion, best player on the team, top tier NBA draft pick. On the other side, you've got the guy who stayed, has a ton of records within the university, and came close to a natty. But ultimately, I mean, Melo's got the thing on his ring finger. I'm not flipping you off, James. This is the ring finger right here. He's got that thing on his ring finger that DC doesn't, and it's tough to see, but I mean, at the end of the day, winning means so much in my arguments for who is the best of the best. And that's why I want to present this to you. And this is what I'll leave with here and get your opinion on this. You brought up all those names that can sort of be in the conversation. And it feels like the guy who gets lost in the shuffle, he's like, I'm not going to say, but it's like the Hall of Very Good versus Hall of Fame argument. This guy, I feel like, gets too much lumped into the very good as opposed to being in contention for being the number one guy in Syracuse program history. But it's Jerry Mcnamara. I mean, the guy was a significant piece of a national championship winning team as a true freshman. He's one of the top 5 in scoring, assists, steals. He's top 20 all time in the NCAA in three-pointers made. Like, what am I missing here? Why is his name not thrown around when he has the ring and he's got all the accolades to go along with it?
Maybe it's his stature. Maybe it's he's not 6'8" and athletic and can dunk the ball and did so on. And but I think you're absolutely right. I mean, Jerry was unbelievable, and from the time he stepped on foot, from the time he stepped on
Clutch
campus,
gene too.
Yeah, I mean, time and again, I can't really remember too many times he didn't come through in the clutch. But, I mean, I think winning a title early, and then he went to a Sweet 16 in his sophomore year. In those final 2 years, it was tough. I think he got defended a little bit differently. He kind of became the guy who was the top on the scouting report without maybe the talent on the wing that Syracuse had, certainly after losing Melo and then after losing Hakeem his sophomore year. So I think it was a little bit tougher for him. But, I mean, when you look at it, too, I mean, the guy won back-to-back Big East tournaments in 2005 and 2006. So I think you're right, though. I think Jerry's definitely up there and grouped into that, pretty good, along with, maybe some guys like Lawrence Moten or something like that. But Jerry's up there. I mean, he's absolutely a legend.
By the way, speaking of NCAA tournaments, have you seen who is on Syracuse's next opponent, Brown? Have you seen who is on the coaching staff there?
I have not.
TJ Sorrentine.
Oh, no.
Are you getting bad omens, bad vibes now leading into this game on Monday?
You get the Gus Johnson call just immediately comes to mind from the parking lot. That's every Celtics fan's worst nightmare for sure.
Yep. All right. Well, James, appreciate the time. Tell us what's coming up for you on Nunes Magician and what's happening in your life for the next couple weeks for Syracuse.
Well, I'm down here in the state of Florida. I'm trying to stay safe, but I'm down here for a couple more weeks. If that Miami game gets played, I'll be at Miami. I'll be at Wasco Center. So, and then we'll head up to Wake Forest later that Saturday on the 8th. And I'll try to cover that game as well, so long as the schedule remains intact. So that's what's on the docket for me. Hopefully, we'll be able to get to those games and have coverage and resume the season as normal, and everybody can stay safe. But that's what we got coming up.
On a scale of 1 to the Castle Coliseum out in beautiful Blacksburg, Virginia, have you been to Watsco? Where's it rank on these sort of dungeon scales of ACC arenas?
It could use a little bit of a facelift, but I like it. It's an intimate vibe. I think they need to do a better job getting fans in that arena because Miami has some potential. When you look back to like the Shane Larkin years, I mean that's when Larinaga really had that thing going. But it's up there. It could use a little bit of a makeover though. They're due for something like that.
All right. Well, the Hurricane fans are coming after you now. So on that note, we will let him go. James Szuba from Nunes Magician. Check his work out there on nunesmagician.com. Also, find him on Twitter at James Szuba. You're not going to find better Syracuse coverage out there on the Twitter sphere as well as on the internet. Thanks so much for your time, and hopefully we'll talk soon.
Thanks, Tyler. Always a pleasure.
All right. We appreciate all of you for listening today. Tim and I will be back next week. We will preview that game against Brown on Monday, a new addition to the schedule. We'll have the prop shop, we'll have our picks and all that good stuff and more on Monday's show. Everybody have a safe, happy holiday. Tim and I will be off tomorrow. We're going to take the Christmas Eve off, and then we will be back with you on Monday. So happy holidays to everyone who may be celebrating, and we'll talk to you next week.